This is Paw Print, an animal rescue community, episode 120. I'm Nancy Rhee.
And I'm Harold Rhee. Today's guest is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau, host of the podcasts Food for Thought and Animalogy.
We all tell each other the things we want to hear because the truth is painful. And the truth means that we have to do something different. I was a very compassionate child, and that compassion began to be dulled by the excuses that we tell. And because we're told that we have to do this thing because it's status quo, because it's the way everybody else does things.
We're very excited to have Colleen on. She has been a longtime podcaster, well over 10 years, and she's an award-winning author. She has 7 of her books in print on Amazon, all around the vegan lifestyle and animal advocacy. We spend some time talking about her newest podcast, Animalogy, what's been going on in the vegan movement, as well as her latest trip to Africa. She also speaks about her Compassion in Action Conference, something that's becoming an annual affair, this year, Saturday, August 26th. If you want to learn more about Colleen Patrick-Goudreau, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/120.
I've been talking about the animal-related words and expressions we use and idioms we use and origins of words related to animals for a long time, and they are interwoven in Food for Thought. But I really felt that the focus of my work right now is really that the animal-related words and expressions we use and how they affect and reflect our relationship with other animals. And I just felt it needed its own podcast. It's also, I'm working on a book. I see it as a larger project. And it's really that. It's an exploration of the words we use, the expressions we use that have animals in their origins, words that people don't know have animals in their origins because they're so deeply embedded and they're so old. Words like muscle, the word muscle comes from the word that means mouse because an anatomist saw the resemblance of a little mouse moving under a blanket when he saw a muscle moving under the skin. And so it was called muscle. That's the word for mouse. The M-U-S is the word for mouse. The word coccyx comes from the word that means cuckoo bird because it resembles the beak of a cuckoo bird. It's a triangular shaped bone. So, it's really fascinating to me to know how many words, or discover how many words have these animal origins in them, not for novelty. It's certainly fun and it's certainly interesting, but to say we're so connected with them on a consciousness level, we're connected with them on a relationship level, we're connected with them linguistically. And here's the evidence for that. And then we have a lot of expressions that reflect an exploitation and violence towards animals, like these expressions, kill 2 birds with 1 stone, there's more than one way to skin a cat, things like that, which we don't say because we're trying to be violent towards animals, but we have to look at why there are so many expressions that do reflect and express violence towards them. It says something about our history. It says something about our current relationship with them. All of these aspects of our language and what it says about our relationship with animals. And it's so fascinating to me. And I think it's so important. There's a whole other layer of it, and which is fascinating to me because it's linked with other social justice issues, which is the language we use to keep animals down. We use derogatory language like calling people animals, calling people pigs, calling people dogs, calling people baboons. Mm-hmm. And we use that as a way to insult other humans. So not only is it a way to keep animals down, because of course we're saying that they're so low that they don't even deserve their own autonomy, but we're also then, because we've kept animals so low, and it's humans who have kept them low, we're the ones who write this story, we then use those words, either animal in general or the specific species, to insult other humans. And we are in a time when we are called upon to be sensitive to other groups, to disenfranchised groups, and animals are a very huge disenfranchised group. And so I'm saying we need to include them in our circle of mindfulness around how we talk about animals, because it also affects how we talk about other people. So there's a lot to talk about.
Well, yeah. I mean, as you say, we're sort of at this inflection point when it comes to whether it's, what we choose to eat or, I don't know, scientific experiments involving animals. When you thought of Animalogy, what did you hope people would change about themselves or about their mindset?
The way I see it is that I'm holding up a mirror and reflecting back to listeners, to readers, what they need to get out of it, because I know, because it's not a huge leap. Once you hold up a mirror and say, we're using language like kill two birds with one stone, which is violent. So what does that mean for you? Is this reflecting your own compassion? Does this reflect what you really feel? Does this reflect the relationship you have with birds or with animals? If you're calling someone an animal because they've just committed a horrific violent act, is that really reflective of the animal? Do they deserve that? And what does it say about how we regard other humans? So I want to hold up a mirror and encourage people to ask the questions themselves. Of course, the ultimate end for me is to reflect a compassion for animals that I believe we do have, that maybe our language hasn't even caught up with yet. Because again, I think a lot of it's unconscious. I don't think people are, looking to stone birds and they're looking to kill birds with stones. I mean, I don't think that's reflective. And so that's part of what I'm saying is, does this really reflect your compassion for animals? And if your language doesn't, then what does that mean for you in terms of how you talk and how you speak?
Well, as someone who's listened to several episodes of Animalogy, I would say the big thing that really comes to me is the amount of research. It's exhaustive how much time you put into this, even for simply like choosing one word and finding the root of it. I mean, how long does it actually take you to do the background research? It
takes hours. And a lot of it is content that I've just been gathering over the years, and I just keep discovering more, which is so much fun for me. So my background's in literature, and I went to grad school for English literature, and I love the research part. I love digging deep. I love deconstructing what's in front of me and discovering what's underneath. So it's a lot of research, and it's research I enjoy. So I keep discovering new words. I was just listening to another podcast myself, someone else's podcast yesterday, and I'm compiling this stuff all the time. So I'm compiling words, for instance, words that have lion in the origin. So dandelion. I have a whole list of plants and botanicals and flowers that have been named after animals as inspired by animals, either the way they look or the way they feel. And so dandelion was already on my list, but chameleon wasn't. And chameleon also has lion in its roots. And so I'm discovering new words and expressions all the time. And I just put them on my list and I'm blown away myself. So I share that enthusiasm with the listener who's hearing it for the first time, because I also have that experience as well.
Absolutely. I'm thinking all my high school English teachers would absolutely be fascinated with your podcast. So thank you.
Well, I think, Harold, to that point, I think it's actually a really helpful way to learn new words. I mean, when I was young in high school, I've always loved etymology. And I remember reading a book on the origins of words. It's the most helpful way to expand your vocabulary, because once you know the root, once you know one root word, one Latin word or Greek word, then you see that connection in so many other words, and it helps you just expand. So it's a really fun way to expand your own vocabulary, but it also helps you really pay attention. So you asked me what I want people to get out of it. One of the things that I do is when I hear people talk now, all I hear are what I'm calling animalogies, these words or expressions that are rooted in animals. And so I'll say, that's an animalogy. And they'll say, what are you talking about? And I'll explain to them. So I also want people to be paying attention and hear the words that people are saying, or that they're saying themselves, and go, that's an animalogy. That's an animalogy. And ultimately, then, like I said, celebrate this relationship we have with animals, or question the words we're using about them.
Okay. We're talking to Colleen Patrick-Goudreau, host of both two podcasts, Food for Thought, and her newest podcast, Animalogy. Colleen, when you do your research and you look up, let's say, all these different idioms, right? Two birds with one stone, that type of thing. Was there any particular era of, let's say, English literature that really struck you as having produced a lot of these idioms and phrases?
That's a good question. I don't think there's one era. Some of them have morphed over hundreds of years and become something else. Some of them came about, at one time or another. I mean, I would say there's a lot of things that happened in probably the Middle Ages that do reflect the exploitation of animals. It's certainly when we were expanding farming and living very closely to other animals, and certainly that era, the Renaissance after that, there was so much violence. I mean, we have a lot of work to do here today, and yet when you look at the kinds of sports and just entertainment that, again, we are not innocent of that at all. But there were some pretty horrific things going on that were, public displays of cruelty towards animals. And so there's a lot going on there. But actually, one thing that's really interesting is when I look at, for instance, so there's a whole series, and this will be in the book. I'm actually about to launch this series in the podcast. It's a 3-parter about the words we use around the animals we eat. We all kind of know what happened when English was, Old English was in England, and then the Normans came and with their French language influenced English greatly. About 10,000 words came into English after the Norman conquest in 1066. So for 300 years, English was expanded with a lot of French-inspired words. And so what happens specifically around animals and the animals we eat, you have Old English pig and you have Old French pork. You have Old English cow and steer and bull and calf, and you have Old French or Norman French beef. You have Old English sheep, and you have Norman French mutton. So you have all these changes where you used to have the one word for both the living and the slaughtered. They would say cow, they would say steer, they would say pig, they would say hog. And then you have this French influence where now we say, and we continue to say, beef, pork, mutton, poultry. And these are all French-inspired words. What has been fascinating to me is that if you actually dig down even deeper into the origins of all the Old English words for the living animals, the pigs, the hogs, the steer, the bulls, etc., the chickens, the roosters, all of these are Old English words, you actually find something that was very common, especially in Proto-Indo-European words, which was the ultimate root of a lot of these Old English words. You find that the words themselves reflect some characteristic of the animal in a positive way. So you go back to a time when we were certainly farming these animals and domesticating them for the first times in the Proto-Indo-European sense, for sure. But they actually were, in a way, celebrating characteristics of these animals. So, for instance, now the Old English word pig, there's evidence it comes from a Proto-Indo-European word fair, F-E-A-R-H. And that word is the root of our word furrow. It means to dig, because that's a characteristic of pigs. They use their snouts to dig and furrow. You look at the word cock, for instance, male rooster, and that's it's like an onomatopoeia, because that's one of the expressions they would use vocally. So you start to dig down. Fawn means a swelling, which refers to the female carrying their fawn, their offspring, in their belly. And to me, so it's not just looking at, and of course I do look at the idioms you're talking about that are more violent, and is there a time where that was more common? But you could also look and see the celebration of the animals and the characteristics they had. You look at pork and beef and mutton, that they only mean the slaughtered animal. They don't mean anything other than the flesh of that animal. But when you look at the words pig and dog and all of these words for domesticated animals, these Old English words, you see a celebration of their personalities or attributes in some way. So it's mixed, and English is it's pretty old language, so you got a lot to go back and look at.
Right. Thanks for sharing all that. Switching gears to your roots as really not only a vegan, but just a really wonderful voice and someone who's created a community around veganism, around animal advocacy. What are some of the resources that maybe you've produced, whether it's a podcast or a book, that you might point a listener to?
Well, it kind of goes back to what I said about animalogy. Is the first question I have is, are our actions reflecting our values? And that's really what I ask of people. So if your actions are reflecting your values, you're good. just listen to Animalogy for fun. If not, if we're not reflecting our values of compassion and kindness for animals in our behavior, i.e. how we eat, what we wear, what entertainment we patronize, then what I ask of people is to just be open. Listen to Food for Thought podcast. None of what I do is to shock people or make people feel bad. It's all about holding up a mirror. It's all about saying, look, this is the truth. Do with it what you want. But here we have to at least look at what we're contributing to. And that was my experience when I realized I was contributing to the inherent violence that is the meat, dairy, and egg industries, because it is a culture of violence. We're paying people to be desensitized to animal suffering, and we're paying people to be desensitized to their own compassion. When I looked and bore witness to that and was horrified by it, and most people are, my first instinct was that I didn't want to be part of it. So I just really ask people to be open, to look, to not be afraid. And then once they realize, because I think people are afraid of looking because they know if they look, they're going to be compelled to make a change. And that's what people are afraid of. So I acknowledge that and say, I get it. Change is hard. We're creatures of habit. But if you're at least willing to make some changes, I'm here for you. And the resources I provide are to help you and guide you through, especially a transition from eating animals to not. I know what it's like. I've guided thousands of people, but I did it myself. And so the 30-Day Vegan Challenge is another resource that I have for people. It's an online program. It's also a book. And it just guides people through the first 30 days to say, we are creatures of habit. It is a matter of changing old habits and replacing them with new ones, building a foundation so that you look in a different direction. It's not as scary as people think, especially when they have some guidance. So I would say check out Food for Thought podcast and check out the 30-Day Vegan Challenge.
Gotcha. Now, speaking of 30-Day Vegan Challenge, is it being re-released? Is it being refreshed?
It was refreshed. So the book that is on Amazon right now is the most current copy. And then the online program, there's a paid version that has extra, recipes, et cetera. But there's also a free version. So Cowspiracy is a wonderful documentary about the effects of animal agriculture on the environment. And Cowspiracy.com, I believe it's .com, their Take Action page is the 30-Day Vegan Challenge. So, of course, go watch Cowspiracy. And then whether you watch it or not, you can take the 30-Day Vegan Challenge through their website, and it's free. You just don't get some of the recipes that you get in the paid online version or in the book, but it's still a ton of information, videos, audios, podcasts, written content that's really helpful.
Okay. For those who don't know you, why don't we rewind the clock a little bit? How did you, what was your own journey? How did you actually get to this point today?
It's, a very typical journey. A very short version is I grew up eating animals. I'm here in New Jersey right now. Of course, I live in California, but we're visiting family, and I grew up in this lovely state of New Jersey and grew up eating animals, but I also loved animals, but I didn't know I was eating animals. And when I asked my parents what I was eating, we all tell each other the things we want to hear because the truth is painful. And the truth means that we have to do something different. And I was a very compassionate child, and that compassion began to be dulled by the excuses that we tell, and because we're told that we have to do this thing because it's status quo, because it's the way everybody else does things. And it really wasn't until I was about 20 and I read Diet for a New America by John Robbins that I really started to open my eyes, or it started to open my eyes. And so I stopped eating land animals, and I kept, I was probably eating aquatic animals, and I was still eating dairy and eggs, but still considered myself a compassionate person, and but it was blocked. It was a conditional compassion because I, of course, loved dogs, of course, loved animals, of course, loved them all, would never have hurt them, intervened when they were hurt in any way. But yet I was paying people to do things to animals I would never have done myself. And so luckily I just kept reading and kept exploring. And it was a few years later that I read another book, and it was called Slaughterhouse. And it was an investigative journalist who wrote the book and interviewed slaughterhouse workers. And that's when I became really clear about the culture of violence that I was contributing to, because no matter how they're raised or where they come from, the end is pretty horrific. And being a culture of violence where the workers are desensitized, it's not really just about them killing the animals that's really difficult. It's about the torture they inflict because they're frustrated, because they have to meet these quotas, because there's pressure, and because they're desensitized. And so it was that really changed my whole perspective. And I became vegan, which I prefer to say it's longer, but I prefer to say, at that moment, I removed the blocks to the compassion that had been inside of me all along. This become vegan, that's what it means. It means becoming awakened to your full compassion. And it really does. You really do look at the world through a very different lens. And that was the shift for me. That was about 20 years ago. And from there, I just wanted to help other people kind of get to that same point. So that's where I started doing what I do, which is raising awareness, providing outreach, providing resources. I really feel like people know why vegan or why vegetarian, but they really struggle with the how. So I see my work as being the how, as being the guide, as being the conduit to be able to help people reflect their values.
What have you seen as far as trends, I don't know, in the past, let's say 10 years? I mean, has the vegan community grown at a faster rate, or is it still a little bit of a drip?
I think the number of people who are vegan has stayed pretty steady, which is disconcerting because it is such a beautiful way to live. And yet I think the reason for that has to do with the social aspects, which is why I spend a lot of time talking about finding your voice and knowing where you end and another person begins, and really guiding people through all the social aspects. You do not become a freak when you become vegan. You become a kinder, deeper person. But there's a lot of stuff that goes around with the social aspects. So I talk a lot about that. Where I have seen a lot of improvement is in the food industry. So in the food industry, the fastest growing segment of the food industry, the packaged food industry specifically, is the vegan foods. And that is encouraging, especially in the last few years. The number of really sophisticated products, cheeses and yogurts and meats is incredibly encouraging, because that's really what it comes down to. I mean, when I talk about our consumption of animals is not about us we're not obligate carnivores. Like, we don't look at a squirrel running past us and think about lunch. Like, that's not what we are. We're not lions. We're not obligate carnivores. We don't crave the flesh of other animals. So when people say, I really tried to be vegetarian, but I was craving a hamburger. No, you weren't, but you probably were craving fat, and you were craving salt, and you were craving texture, and you were craving familiarity. And that's what these products provide for people. I know there's talk, people say, oh, but they're just as bad. No, they're not. First of all, no animal is being killed. No human is being desensitized. And, it's about texture. I mean, we're eating incredibly processed foods that are really harmful to us when we're eating meat, dairy, and eggs. When we're eating vegan meats, and it doesn't mean you make the entire foundation of your diet everything hyper processed, but, some of these aren't even that hyper processed. You can just take a look at the ingredients. But the bottom line is they are better for us, and they kind of check all those boxes: the fat, the salt, the texture, the familiarity. And so why wouldn't we do that? And then, of course, vegetables and plants and seeds and grains and all of the other options that are there for us. So that's where I'm seeing a real shift is in the options for foods, and restaurants are carrying these now. So that's where I'm seeing a lot of hope. And you don't have to be vegetarian, obviously, to consume them. And I think these companies have figured that out, that it's bigger than a niche market. It's more than just for vegans.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. One of the episodes that I love, and I think for an animal rescue podcast really connected me to what you were trying to do, are just some of your travel trips, right? Or your trips, excuse me. Your most recent episode recapping your Africa trip was amazing. I mean, you combine your love of being a vegan with trying to visit and protect animals in their environments. Could you maybe speak a little bit about your Africa trip, or maybe some other trips that you've recapped?
I feel like it's a privilege to live in Oakland and have deer and foxes and squirrels and raccoons and possums in our yard. I mean, I feel that it's a real honor, and I really try and kind of recalibrate people's perception of wild animals. I'm vegan, but I don't care only about farm animals, obviously. I just don't want anybody to be hurt, and we have to learn to live among the other beings on this planet. And that means whether I'm in Oakland or if I'm traveling to Rwanda or Botswana. And so I'm always looking through the lens of, what can I do to help, and certainly what can I do to not harm? And so, Dian Fossey was one of my first animal protection heroes. She went to Rwanda to be part of Leakey, Dr. Leakey's work on really counting the number of gorillas. It wasn't even about protection at that point. It was about getting a sense of how many gorillas there were left in the world. Because by the time Dian Fossey went there in the 60s to Rwanda, there were only about 100, 150 mountain gorillas left. And they only live in this one area on the Virunga Mountains in Rwanda and Uganda and Congo in that area. And because of so much human warfare, and poaching and stealing and killing adults to take the babies to sell them to zoos, their population had declined so drastically. And Dian Fossey became a real hero for them, not only just being there to observe them, but also to really document who they were and how many there are and to acclimate them to humans. And so now here we are so many years later. She was killed in 1994. And to go to the place where she was to see these mountain gorillas was an absolute honor. And now there are about 900 mountain gorillas. So it's encouraging. There's a lot of work to be done on making sure we don't continue to destroy the habitat of all animals, of all other beings. And there's still work to be done, of course, in Rwanda. But Rwanda, there's no poaching. A lot of the people who were poachers are now the guides and the trackers to bring people like us into the world of these gorillas in a way that's very mindful of them. You don't see them. No gorilla group sees humans for more than an hour a day. So it's very respectful. But honestly, it's part of what's saving them because of the money that goes into the conservation from people like me who paid $800 to go see the gorillas. Now, if I never got to see them, I would still pay to protect them and do what I can to protect them. But what an honor. And I really see it as a privilege, not a right, which is why, I'm not a supporter of zoos, because it's not our right to see every animal on the planet just because we think we can. So, so when I travel, of course, where I'm able to go see animals in a way that's respectful. Botswana is where we saw a lot of the wild animals. Of course, their version of our deer. They have zebras and elephants, and we have foxes and coyotes and deer. So everywhere I go, I try to make sure that's part of the journey. And we have Thailand we're going to in October, and we're going to go to an elephant sanctuary there. And so it's not just about me being able to see them. It's actually about bringing their stories back to people who haven't heard about these issues through the podcast, so like you're talking about. So people don't know that the elephants in Thailand, these people who pay to get rides by elephants. I mean, these elephants are tortured in order to be tame enough to let people ride on their backs. And it's not okay. And, we're decimating their habitat, and then we're taking them and using them for tourists. It's just, again, I don't think it really reflects, if we really understood and stepped back and thought about it, it doesn't really reflect our compassion for these animals. So whatever I can do to also raise awareness about these issues, that's really also what I love to be able to do. And that's why I share the stories on my podcast.
Wow, super exciting. What does 2017 look like for you? I mean, it sounds like trip to Thailand and the elephant sanctuary. What else are you working on?
So Animalogy is really the focus of everything I'm doing. So I'm working with my agent right now to figure out what the book how the book is structured, because as we talked about earlier, the content is so vast and varied, and we want to make sure that it's structured in a way to really appeal to the widest audience possible. So I do want Animalogy to live in the form of a book. I think it would be fabulous. So continuing to work on the podcast, working on the book, and I've also we've got some other travel coming up, and the trip to Thailand is actually part of something we've done now a couple times to different countries, where I invite 20 people to join us for a vegan trip to somewhere in the world, and we create all the arrangements, and people just have to show up and trust that we're going to create a fabulous experience for them from the perspective of really fabulous food, but also not doing anything that would be exploitative, of course, of animals, where other tour groups might, not think about. And so we're going to visit some sanctuaries. And so we're also looking towards 2018 for some of those trips. I plan a Compassion in Action event. This is our second annual one in Oakland, where we just spend the weekend talking about compassionate communication. And in this case, we're going to be talking about political engagement to protect animals, both locally, but also, federally, to make sure that animals are being represented in government, because we're the only voices they have. So that's really the focus of this year, and that's a lot to focus on. There's enough to talk about with the Animalogy, and it's a weekly podcast, so it keeps me busy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, you're trying to squeeze in a lot in a short period of time. How do folks find you? Whether it's the many books you've authored, your podcasts, really just what's going on with you?
Well, they can find me at my website at ColleenPatrick-Goudreau.com. If it's easier, it's joyfulvegan.com. And from there, there's everything. The books are there. My articles are there. I'm a contributor to KQED Radio, so you can check those out. The podcast, of course, you can see there. And lots of shareables, too. If there's content that you like and you want to share with other people, we've got lots of graphics that people can share on their social media accounts. So it's all there on my website.
Okay. Well, we usually end our podcast by asking a question about animal rescue, but I think in your case, if there's one thing you could change, if you had that magic wand, and there's one thing you could change about how we treat animals, what do you think that would be?
I think it would start with how we think about animals. And my hope for our future as a species is that we shift from a mindset that sees them as here for us to do with as we please. And we shift it to a mindset that sees them as autonomous beings who contribute to their own lives and their own relationships, and they want to keep their offspring, and they want to have their own homes, and they just don't want to be bothered, and they just don't want to be intruded upon. If we can shift our perception to see the world through their lens as opposed to our lens, that really will shift how we treat them. So that's my hope.
We want to say thank you to Colleen Patrick-Goudreau for sharing her story. If you want to learn more about Colleen or her upcoming Compassion in Action conference on Saturday, August 26th, go to our show notes at thisispawprint.com/120. If you'd like to meet me or Nancy on social media, want to highlight our Facebook page, where we share the latest and greatest in animal rescue. You can find us at facebook.com/thisispawprint, all one word. Make sure to follow us and join the conversation. If you want to listen to more episodes of Paw Print, you can find us on your favorite podcast app, like Apple Podcasts, also known as iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Search for Paw Print Animal Rescue and make sure to hit the subscribe button to get the latest episodes immediately. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we feature the topic of separation anxiety. We share interviews with Irit Bloom, regular guest on the show, as well as Milena DiMartini, a nationally renowned expert in separation anxiety. Make sure to join us for this special episode. We want to say thanks for sharing Paw Print with your friends and family. We're now at 120 episodes, and we couldn't have done it without your support. So thanks. And remember, you share a positive message of love and peace by saving an animal. Have a great day, everyone, and see you next time on Paw Print.
Paw Print is a production of EVER Education.
You can't handle the truth.